Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to The Caring View, the only online social care chat show that is live every single Tuesday. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. You'll know where to find our episodes every single time that we go live. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments and we'll be sure to address them as we go along. And as always, all views and opinions expressed tonight are of our own and not our individual companies. Now, Mark is skiving tonight. Mark has taken the night off. He is at home recuperating at this moment in time. So we all send him love and healing. But tonight will be fantastic no matter what, because we are joined by Kira Lawrence, big engagement lead at Mencap, and Mike Adams, CEO and founder of Purple. And we're discussing disability awareness today. So welcome both. Welcome. Kira, do you want to give us a bit of an introduction so that our guests can meet you?
Yes, so good evening and hello everybody. My name is Kira Lawrence. I have a learning disability and I currently work for the UK leading learning disability charity Mencap, and I am currently engagement lead in the CEO and governance directorate team.
Oh, I'm telling you, I'm always on mute. We'll come back to your role, Kira, because you shared something with us before you went live, which I think is incredible, and we'll have a chat about that shortly. But Mike, do you want to just give us a quick introduction to yourself?
Yes, thank you, Adam, and good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Adams, and I'm Chief Exec of Purple. And fundamentally, Purple is an organisation changing the disability conversation and moving that dial from an issue that's traditionally seen as about welfare, about vulnerable people, about charity, and moving it to seeing disability as a value, as a community, as a contribution, as an opportunity. And that works, Adam, just as much in social care as every other sector. So delighted to be joining you this evening.
Thank you, bro. Thank you. So, I mean, for me, this is something I'm hugely passionate about. I'm a huge believer in equality, diversity, and inclusion. But I'm also a believer that in the UK, our biggest strength, our strongest characteristic in the UK is our diverse community. Whether that be race, whether that be gender, orientation, disability, no matter what, we are so diverse, and that's our biggest strength. And we have to start leaning into that, and we have to start supporting that and nurturing the diversity within our communities to succeed anywhere. You know, people need to see themselves reflected. We want to make sure that, you know, the children growing up nowadays are going to grow up in a world without fear and without hatred and without prejudice. And there will be, in my eyes, this Gene Roddenberry utopian future in you know, coming our way. And the work yourselves are doing, I think, is getting there. So Kira, 20 years, is it, at Mencap now?
Yes, I've been there 20 years. So my very first job was audio assistant working in our employment service. And since then, I've worked in our fundraising department, our PR department, our campaigning department. I've been a receptionist. I've done everything and anything across Mencap. And 20 years later, I'm now working as engagement lead at Mencap in the CEO and governance team. And I'm currently helping to lead work on our Mencap 5-year big plan. And it's amazing. And the key message of the big plan is that we want the UK to be the best place in the world for people with a learning disability to live happy and healthy lives. And I think that's amazing. And as someone with a learning disability, I want to see that happen. I want to live a happy, healthy life. So I'm very closely working with other people with a learning disability, getting them involved in the big plan work and making sure they're heard. So I love my career. I'm very, very lucky.
I mean, it sounds like a vocation. It sounds like a way of life to you, Kira, if I'm honest. Now, we say 20 years, and every single time someone says, you know, 20 years ago to me, I automatically think 1980. But, you know, sickeningly, it was just after the millennium 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But in that 20 years, Kira, have you noticed a change in the approach and the awareness of learning disabilities and how people are treated with learning disabilities?
I think I've definitely seen a change. It's been slow change. So people with a learning disability years ago were locked away in a long stay hospital institution. That's where they lived. That's where they were. But now people are coming out of those places. They're living in independent living. They're living in supported living. People are out in the community. Sadly, people with a learning disability still aren't getting equal health care, but we are campaigning to make sure that changes. People with a learning disability still aren't 100% not heard in the media, and we need to change that. We need to see more people in the media speaking out for people with a learning disability. We are starting to see that, but there's a long way to go down. So I've seen some change. I've seen people have more jobs. I've seen people wanting homes of their own. I've seen people wanting relationships. But sadly, it's society's barriers that still stop us. And a recent campaign that Mencap ran said that people didn't know how to talk to someone with a learning disability. They didn't feel comfortable in that person's kind of closeness. And so we know there's a long way to go before society really understands how to know what a learning disability is and isn't. So a learning disability is not dyslexia, it's not learning difficulty. Learning disability is a lifelong condition that you have all your life. So learning difficulty and learning disability are very two different things. And it's just about someone just needing extra support in their life to achieve the things they want to achieve. And for me, I've got married, I've got a home of my own, I've got a career. 25 years ago, if someone had said to me, Kira, you're going to get married and have a job, I would have laughed in their face and gone, ha, 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 that, yeah, right. And 20 years on, I have everything that everybody else deserves. And I now deserve that, and I've got it. And I'm very vocal about other people with a learning disability speaking up for themselves. So, yeah, I have seen change, some good change, but some still an improvement. There is room for improvement.
And I think that's the frustrating thing when it comes to change, because there's a lot of bureaucracy and there's a lot of politics and there's a lot of things that hold change back. And it's very difficult to get it as quick as we actually want it. It's very difficult to get it as fast as we actually want it. You know, to bring it to the LGBT community, we've seen over the last couple of days, Florida actually pass a law, which is the Don't Say Gay bill. And we make so much progress in one way, and then it just reverts back in another. Now, you said something interesting then, Kira, around the definition of learning disabilities. And I want to come to Mike on this, because I've had conversations with people in the past, and learning disabilities, especially learning disability care settings, usually have everyone lumped in together. So acquired brain injuries, and they all fall under one umbrella category. Now, how do we flip the narrative on what disabilities are, and how do we give people their identities, and what is Purple doing to raise that profile of disability awareness?
No, absolutely. And it goes back to how do we change the disability conversation? And one of that's about definition. And 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, if you'd said to people disability, they would have gone, yeah, the international sign, the wheelchair. Yeah, we're talking about wheelchair users. And in some ways, the wheelchair sign has been brilliant for disability in terms of raising the profile worldwide. But wheelchair users make up 8% of the entire population of disabled people globally, and we're talking 14.1 million people here in the UK. We are talking, Adam, 22% of the population of the UK. And when you look at it, 80% of disabled people have a hidden disability. And so we're having to reorientate ourselves about how we think about the whole issue. And we're talking about learning disabilities. We're talking about learning difficulties. And Kira explained that brilliantly well, better than I could ever do. But we're also talking about people with sensory impairments. We're talking about mental health and the spectrum of mental health, and that is exponentially growing since the start of COVID, where people who never thought they'd be touched by mental health, either they have or their families, and suddenly it's come home and to people's work. And we did a webinar the other month on living with cancer, and it was amazing how many people who even had cancer or who had recovered from cancer didn't know under the definition that they had still had rights. And so we need to understand, when we talk about disability, we need to understand that we're actually talking about 22% of the population. That's not really a marginal issue at all. And then you drill down into the numbers and you see some of the inequities within and across disabilities. So if you look at employment, for example, you will see that people with learning disabilities are disproportionately more unemployed than other disabilities, for example. So within that whole spectrum of disability, you then have to disaggregate it even further and drill into the detail. And I think that's really important. And to your point about social care, I think we have to get into a world of calling us Mike, Kira, and Adam. And if we're a user of social care services, we're customers. I mean, and I think that's incredibly important concept for social care, because it forces and changes the dynamic from one which is traditionally a kind of patriarchal kind of, we look after you, to how do we facilitate you to have a fulfilling and equal life, like Kira's just talked about. And so I think within this, and what you've said, Adam, is there is a huge opportunity for social care to make pretty transformational changes, even by getting the language and etiquette right.
Yeah. And I think language for me is something that I struggle with the most, because you automatically think you're saying the right thing, and yet you'll speak to people and go, actually, no, that's actually offensive to us. Yeah. So I always refer to people as their chosen name, or as when I, in our plans, I always refer to people as people, because for me, it's nice and generic, because we are all people at the end of the day. No matter what we look like and no matter what we do, we are all people. But what I'm finding at the moment is I'm trying to make platforms available to get people's voices included as much as possible. So for me, social care is more than a sector. It's more than an industry. It's an idea. I had a meeting with someone the other day, and they said to me, I have no experience in social care. I said, well, have you ever opened the door for someone and let them through at a supermarket because they couldn't do it themselves? Yeah, well, that's social care. Social care is community. Social care is everybody's involvement to improve people's lives. But I find it difficult to welcome people onto a platform to have that voice and have that informed conversation. Maybe because I don't know where to engage with people, or maybe because I struggle to use the right language to engage with people. So, Kira, big engagement leader at MenCap, you obviously engage with multiple people quite often in events. What's the best way for us to make sure that we're including everybody's voices in what we do? How do we encourage people into the podium to have that say?
So my favorite word right now is co-production. So at the moment, my colleagues in our team who work with me and I work with, we're really trying to make sure that we do co-production properly. So at the moment, when we have a new project at MenCap, they'll come to us and say, we want to really include people with a learning disability in this, but we don't know how to do it. Tell us. So then it's about making sure people with a learning disability are then right from the beginning involved in the creation of it, in the first meeting, in the design, in the name, really making them being included right from the start, not just at the end and someone comes to them and go, what do you think of this, and shove it under their nose. No, actually it's about, if you talk to them from the beginning, yes, it might take more time, and yes, you might have to put your deadlines back, but actually it's so much more worth it, because you're going to get more time, you're going to get more voices, you're going to get more opinions, and it's amazing. And I've done it recently with the project I worked on, and the people fed back to us that actually having that extra time and pushing back on things actually really worked, because they had such great feedback having people with learning disabilities involved in that project properly. So it's really worth taking the time, getting to meet people with a learning disability, asking them how they want to be involved, asking them do they have ideas, asking them if they want to be part of it. And it's making sure they're involved right from the beginning, right through to the end. But I think this is a new thing that people are really wanting to do it, but it's the how, it's the why. And I think once people have that, they will include people properly. But it's just that first thing of, I don't know if we could do this. And actually, once they understand, they go off and they go, this is fantastic. So it's just about talking to us.
Yeah, and you know, co-production is like my favorite word. It's honestly, for the last year, I've done nothing but use the word co-production.
Yeah.
And you are right, co-production it's not like collaboration where you get somebody involved for a little bit of a small period of a project. Co-production is beginning to end, lifelong working together on a project. And you're right, Kira. If I went to someone and went, here's this project that I've done, I just need you to look over it and cross the T's and dot the I's, that's not involvement.
No.
That's just approve what I've written. Whereas starting with that blank canvas and getting those voices at the get-go, you're absolutely spot on. Language is a difficult one, isn't it, Mike? And you know, I toy with we used to say lived experience. I also like experts by experience. And then the more I use them, the more I think I'm not actually asking people what they prefer to be referred to, especially if I'm doing a webinar or a round table and I want to make sure all voices are included. I don't want them being there as the token story. I want them there with their experience and the knowledge that we can learn from them. So how do we get language right, Mike?
I think, Adam, it's as simple as common sense. I think intuitively in 2022, most of us know across the characteristics what is right and what is wrong. And I think we have to get to a position where for 99% of people, they will respond to you in the context in which you have given it. And I know people are different, but I don't get hung up whether I'm called a person with disability or a disabled person. People aren't interested in the politics of that kind of language. I prefer them to call me Mike, but you know, but interestingly, so Purple Tuesday, which is our kind of initiative to improve the disabled customer experience, was born from an experience I had 5 years ago when I went Christmas shopping with my partner, and I'm a wheelchair user when we go out. And we went to 27 shops that day, and in 23 of the 27 shops, frontline staff either swerved us altogether or only talked to my partner. And, you know, we worked out that it wasn't total prejudice. It wasn't explicit prejudice against disabled people. What it was this unintentional fear of doing or saying the wrong thing. And what then happened is your default position becomes to swerve the conversation altogether. And if you do that, disabled people are locked out in every which way. And so while language and etiquette is crucially important, and it's interesting today, you know, because there's so many things that we can talk about around what's really important. we could end up talking about language and etiquette for an hour or more, and it's incredibly important. But actually, the substance behind it, and what I say to people is, use your common sense. People will most always respond in the context in which it's given. Don't get hung up about saying the wrong thing if the context is the right one, and then learn from experience, because we're all different. And I think what disabled people, what is required is that equality of opportunity into everything. And I was just thinking, Adam, as you were talking about what social care is, well, actually, me going into all those shops and then being ignored is a lack of social care. Yeah. So I absolutely get it. So it's incredibly important about how we relate to people, and how we kind of recognize and acknowledge difference without making it an issue. And it's really interesting, because I would have said co-production. Co-production done properly is brilliant. Yeah. Co-production done in the old traditional way is tokenistic. So let me give you a phrase rather than a word. And one we use is "Hello, can I help you?" And that's originally was for the retail sector and customer service, but we're using it more often now, because on the basis that 80% of disabled people have hidden impairments, actually you can't make assumptions anymore. That gives you a way in which to acknowledge and recognize the individual, but allows them to respond in a way that they best see fit. So my really good example is someone with a mental health that goes into a shop that's really noisy. Hello, can I help you? Well, actually, I do need to talk to you, but it's a bit noisy here. Can we walk 10 paces to the left, because I need to ask you something? That could be the difference, Adam, between the individual staying, purchasing, and being brand loyal for the rest of their life, or the difference between them turning around, walking straight out the shop, never coming back again, going on social media and telling everyone what a terrible experience they've had. So it is incredibly important, because it is the initiation, it is the introduction. But I think there are ways in which we can do it that actually make sure that it doesn't become the issue and you move on, and the dynamic between the individuals is an equal one.
I mean, all of that is, and you know, if we weren't on a time limit, I could sit and talk about this all night. I find it incredibly interesting and humbling and informative. I think, yeah, touching on the idea that the society is social care, it comes down to things like dementia training, disability awareness, and we always talk in social care, especially, have we got enough training in social care? And for me, any public-facing role should have to go through the basics of social care training, be it dementia awareness, disability awareness, because we need to know how to be able to react to the community. We know how to support them better. I know Morrison's, well, especially my Morrison's around the corner, on a Saturday morning, I think it is, do a quiet hour, which I think is great. But then, and maybe this is my naivety, I think, well, that's absolutely wonderful. But then are we just saying to people, you can only go shopping for an hour on a Saturday comfortably? And should we not be looking at a more inclusive approach to how we work with society on an overall basis? And is there something there, or is that 1 hour on a Saturday acceptable? It's just a thought that's come to my head talking about what you were discussing then, Mike. So thoughts. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. So if you take quiet hour, so Purple Tuesday is about businesses making a commitment around accessibility. And we saw so many organizations adopt the quiet hour, which is brilliant. And alongside that, by the way, you know, have a sensory space as well. But if you take quiet hours, and it was really interesting to see the analysis, because what you found, particularly in shopping centres, that what they did, they had quiet hours on a 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning or a Thursday morning. And then they came back to me and said, well, Mike, I'm really sorry, but we've tried it and it doesn't work. And I said,
But do you not know anything about some of the chaotic nights that people with learning difficulties and disabilities have? And if you've had a chaotic night, the last thing you would want to do is be in a shopping centre at 9 o'clock in the morning. And what then happened was that people moved their quiet hours till 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And lo and behold, the numbers absolutely spiked. And I think what it told me is not only do you need to get the interventions right, but you need to understand the meaning behind the interventions in order to get them really right. And so, for example, so quiet hours are not going to really work at 9 o'clock in the morning, but can be fantastically good at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's a really good illustration of co-production, by the way, because any form of co-production would have said that in 5 minutes rather than an organization off their back going, what's convenient to us, we'll do it then, and it not working, and 7 months later, and the point, Adam, I always make is this is socially the right thing to do, but equally it is commercially the right thing to do. Because the Purple Pound, people will come and spend their money in a good environment. And by the way, if they don't come, predominantly their families don't come as well. So you get that right, and then commercially it works for businesses as well. And you tell me, in this day and age of post-COVID or whatever phase we're in, where actually the legacy, I hope, will be that social impact in brands or organizations or sector is becoming increasingly important, whether you're a staff member wanting to work for a brand that understands diversity, inclusion, whether you're a customer who will vote with your feet and your wallet or your purse, or increasingly investors who are looking at ESG and social impact and only going to invest in those places. So if you can tick the social impact box in a meaningful way, and you can tick the commercial box as well, I really challenge any senior management team to go, no, we don't want to do that. And particularly when the reasonable adjustment is predominantly an absolute free one, because it's about a change in mindset.
Yeah. And you know what, if I'm completely honest, I appreciate if this comes across selfish. I'm sure I have misophonia or whatever it is where you struggle with sounds, because I do get quite irritated quite easily, and I do have social anxiety. So if I'm in crowded places or I'm around too many people, it all becomes a bit too much for me, panic attack, and I have to walk out of the building. And quiet hours are so nice. They're just so relaxing. And I vote all shops should just be like that all the time, because it just creates a much better environment to go and shop in. You can think straight, you don't miss anything. I mean, Kira, is there any adaptations out there at the moment that you think society is making that are huge successes for the disabled community, especially learning disabled?
That's a good question. I think it's society who need training and education. So, you know, for me, I'm still trying to understand how learning disability affects me, because some babies, when they're born having a learning disability. I didn't actually get diagnosed with my learning disability until I was 10 years old, and I was really badly affected at school. My school life was awful. Finally, at the age of 10, when something happened and the school actually went, oh, we've got a problem now. And they pushed it under the carpet for years. At the age of 10, I finally got a diagnosis by an educational psychologist coming to my school, watching me, talking to my teachers. And then I got the SEN statement process through my local authority, which my family battled for 2 years to get me. I then left my mainstream school and I went to a special school. We had to fight for that. But actually, I know that society still don't understand what a learning disability is, what people can do, what people might need support with. And so people ignore people. People won't talk to people like me. They just don't understand. They kind of walk on eggshells with us because they don't know what to say. They think if they say something, it's the wrong thing. I think society, companies need training. The society needs education. But actually, if you spin that if that gets spin on the head, if we saw more people with a learning disability like me on TV shows portraying really what it's like to have a learning disability, society will see that person and go, oh, they're on a TV show, they're doing really well in their life, or they're on a TV program talking about having a learning disability and how brilliant they are. And for me, it's about really seeing people like me out in the media, being role models, being ambassadors for their organisations, or being ambassadors for themselves and advocates as themselves, actually showing what life is really like. I sometimes get to be interviewed on BBC News and on ITV News and on Channel 4 News. And for me, that's a real opportunity for me to prove what I can do. And I get training, I get support, and I can go and do everything. And it's just actually sometimes people don't know what a learning disability is. But if we saw more people with a learning disability in jobs, in the media, being role models, then society will change. And I think a really good example of this, and I'm going to use this example, is Rose Ayling-Ellis, who was on Strictly Come Dancing last year. She obviously is deaf, and she was helping raise awareness of the deaf community. She had reasonable adjustments on that show so that she could take part like all the other celebrity dancers, and she went and won. And they made reasonable adjustments for her. And that was amazing. And I just think if TV shows and the media did that more, we could actually see more people like me being on TV shows, being in society, being in the media, but they just don't know how to do it. That's the issue. And if they met us and talked to us, we could tell them what we need and tell them what we can do. And then we could be on those things. But they just don't take a risk. They don't want to take a risk because they just don't understand. But actually, when I go to a company and I talk about what it's like to have a learning disability, they change their attitude straight away because they've met me. But, I'm just one person with a learning disability. There are 1.5 million people living in the UK with a learning disability. And, we need to hear their voices too. And it's really important we have that.
I mean, you've just gone through like the next 4 questions I wanted to ask, but I'm going to ask them anyway, because it's something I'm super passionate about. And I wasn't going to bring it up, but you mentioned Rosie Ellen from Strictly Come Dancing.
Yeah.
For me, the Oscars last night, Troy Kotsur, I apologize if I'm not saying his name right, is the first deaf male actor to win Best Supporting Actor, to win a gong at the Oscars. And all everybody's talking about today is Will Smith smacking Chris Rock around the face.
Yeah.
And I just think to myself, we had a real moment there They signed his name when he was announced. There was silent applause when he walked up to stage. It was monumental. And unfortunately, we're pushing the drama, which no one agrees with. People shouldn't agree with violence. We don't agree with violence, but we're feeding it in the media because that's what we thrive on. We thrive on the drama. And we're ignoring the absolute incredible moment that happened at the Oscars. What I want to ask, and it's something Carl's brought up in the comments, and it's something I'm a huge. I mean, I watch a lot of Doctor Who, and for me, Doctor Who is one of the most inclusive TV shows on the telly. They try their hardest to be as inclusive as possible, but there is something about the media getting it wrong when they do representations of people with disability. There was the Sire or Sia, however you pronounce it, the movie that came out recently called Music. Where they hired an able-bodied person to play an autistic person, and it went down like a lead balloon. There's the idea that every single person who's got autism is like Rain Man, and I think that's what people will push on. And I think even when we get to physically disabled people, they still try their hardest to sit towards towards community normalized beauty standards as much as possible, because that's what's important, you know. And we're afraid of being too woke. We're afraid of bringing this out there. For someone who is on the TV and representing your community so much, Kira, how do you deal with the negativity and the bullying that might come alongside it? And I'm not presuming you've had any bullying. I understand why people are bullying, but
I have.
There must have been something, you know. Carl's mentioned that because he looks different with his learning disability, there is that bullying aspect. How do you cope with that? What would you say to people who are going through that?
It's very hard. I have been bullied most of my life because of having a learning disability. I've been bullied from a young age because of my learning disability being different. I get trolled on Twitter a lot for my work. I get horrible comments. I get horrible tweets that I'm tagged into. And with MenCap's amazing support, they support me with my social media. And actually, they have really helped me have coping mechanisms now that I can use. And for the first time, actually, I had something earlier this week where I was called a not very nice name at all on Twitter. For the first time, I went, do you know what? I'm going to go to their account. I'm just going to block them. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to block them. And that was the first time I felt strong enough to go, no, it's not okay. Whereas before, I would try and fight them. I would respond back and go, no, you don't understand me. You don't know me. Actually, our social media manager said to me, if you pretended that Twitter was your home, you wouldn't let strangers into your home that you don't know, would you? And I was like, no. Well, think of Twitter as your home. You wouldn't let those bad strangers into your home. So don't let them into your head. And actually, that's now really helped me to go, if I get a horrible tweet, I just block the account. I don't respond. It isn't worth my time. And I go with the people that I love and love me. And actually, for me mentally, that's a much better place to be. It's not been easy. I do want to fight back. I do want to defend my corner, but actually it's not worth feeding their fire anymore. And I know what I can do. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of having a learning disability. And as far as I'm concerned, I'd rather not spend my time fighting people and responding. I'd rather get on with my life, living my life, being the proud person I am. And I have a huge Twitter army that really defend me every time. I have my own pink Twitter army and they're amazing. They jump on people for me and they're amazing. So I have my own little community that are my supporters on social media now.
I mean, that's incredible advice. Absolutely incredible advice.
Yeah.
Don't feed the negativity. Just don't feed it. You're there on social media being an inspiration. And if, that person's at home and they've got nothing better to do than bully somebody, let them say the words. If you don't let them in through your front door, which I think is a fantastic analogy, then ignore that it hurts. I do understand it hurts. I have been on the side of bullying. I can't compare your situation to mine, Kieran. I wouldn't want to come across like I'm saying that, but it is hard. It is really hard. But your advice there is perfect. Absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
Mike, when it comes to media representation, and it's getting better now with race and skin color in the media. But once upon a time, it would be a case of, well, we're doing our best because we've got people of color in our films, but they'd be supporting characters, or, they'd be, on screen for like 5 minutes in a film or a TV series. Do we find that when it comes to disability awareness in media, especially fictionalized media, we're still waiting for that moment to have that leading character, to have that person be represented properly? Or, are we still feeling that we are still the supporting characters and it feels a little bit tokenized, when actually we should probably just have a cast full of people, and if there aren't any disabled actors to come and join us, then we'll hire some able bodies? What more can we do to improve the public awareness and the public perception?
No, I think that's right. And just to go back on what Kira said, I'll join your army later tonight, Kira. And just to go, just Adam, before I answer the question, I don't want you to be despondent about the Oscars. So, and listen, I'm not Mystic Meg. I've got no magic ball. But last September, I wrote a LinkedIn post just before Strictly started, and I said, if Rose gets anywhere near the winning this, it's going to have a huge ripple effect for the deaf community and an understanding, because having 20 million people watching every Saturday night and being in their house, and use what Kira said about Twitter, actually people are in their house, and those moments made a massive difference and had a massive impact. And in that post, I said, by the way, there's just a little film that's come out called Coda, which also, if anyone watches, is going to change people's view as well, because actually it was a deaf family with a non-deaf person in it, which was a different way and a different lens of seeing the issue. And lo and behold, it went and won the Oscar. And the noise around the noise will go, but that will remain. And so it will have a really huge ripple effect. And what we've got to do is replicate Coda, replicate Rose with different impairments in different kind of ways. And I think we will be really successful when we have deaf actors and actresses playing characters that are not instrumental to the plot. It just so happens that they have a disability, they have an impairment. It's not a story about disability.
Exactly, and I do want you to answer my question, because I really am interested in your answer. But it goes, there's an actress, and forgive me, I can't remember her name. She's in The Walking Dead, but she also played the first deaf Marvel superhero in a recent film called The Eternals. Now, the fact that she was deaf played no part in the film, really. She was a speedster, so her power was speed. She could run around the world faster than I could probably blink. But in that film, what I found humbling was they subtitled her, instead of having someone stood next to going, this is what she's saying, as in, oh, they need an interpreter. And it was subtitled, and people had to put up with the subtitles on screen. And she says, we need to normalize subtitles in the world. Once upon a time, people go, oh, if I want to read a book, I'd read what people are saying, I'd read a book. But actually, no, subtitles are there to make people feel inclusive, and they don't need to have an interpreter with them at all times in the movies. And I just think it's incredible. And like you say, Mike, their disability isn't their character.
Yeah.
It's just part of their character. But yes, I can't even remember what my question to you
No,
was.
and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer it. But Adam, the one point I would make is I've got a 14-year-old daughter who is anime mad. So that's Japanese kind of cartoon, anime mad. And what is fascinating and really interesting about anime is the number of characters that happen to have a disability and impairment. But it's not instrumental to the plot. They just are. And I think, you know, she doesn't even see it because she's grown up with it. Well, that's just that character. And I think that is where we've got to go. And I think what's really interesting is that I did a couple of years ago a session with Channel 4 about the advertising industry, and just said actually disability works, and you're starting to see it happen. And everyone probably knows the Mars advert with the wheelchair user talking in the start. Well, that was Mars's biggest ever, most successful advert they've ever made. And Paddy Power did one about a wheelchair user who took his seat to the ground with him. Well, you know, whether you like gambling or not, you know, that worked for them in such a huge way. And you're now seeing on a regular basis, and I saw an advert last night with a blind person talking about hair products, for example, because it works and because it reflects the society in which you and I live. And 5 years ago, there was a statistic that says 50% of us will either have a relative who has a disability or someone in our close network. And I did one of my first after post-COVID, like face-to-face conferences, was 324 people in, and they had the ability to do polls. And I asked the question of those 324 people, you know, how many of you would have a disabled relative or someone in your close network? The answer was 92%. And therefore, disability has resonance in nearly every household. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, would you want to go into a shop, a restaurant, or would you want your auntie, your uncle, your niece, your nephew, your grandma who happens to have a disability to go somewhere and be treated differently or adversely simply because they happen to have a difference? And the answer's got to be no. And I think society is recognizing the answer is no. And so I think they're pulling the media, I think they're pulling advertising, and they're pulling in the direction of doing it because it works. And quite frankly, if you have to drag people in order to do it, but you get to a tipping point and then it becomes normalized, then goes back to your point in, you know, is life different than it was 20 years ago? Absolutely. Does it need to get better? Absolutely. Do we care whether people are pushed or pulled to make that happen? No, we don't. And, you know, media, television and radio have such a huge responsibility. And just listening to Kira, so does social media. And, you know, and I think that has to regulate itself. Yeah. So we are not going to be tolerant of people who can hide behind anonymity and say what they like and get away with it. And society, we don't want it. Actually, we want to recognize difference. It's the whole thing about diversity and inclusion. You know, by nature, we are diverse. And I always say to businesses, it's actually a leadership issue about how you turn that diversity into inclusion. And I think that is what we have to do at a macro level with society and social care. And we can absolutely do it. We don't have to stick to the slow pace in which we've done it for the last 20 years. you know, and quite frankly, we talk about disability, about reasonable adjustments. Well, when COVID hit, the whole country made the biggest reasonable adjustment overnight. And, you know, never ever do I ever want to hear employers saying we're not going to employ disabled people because of health and safety. You know, those days have gone, and we really are pushing forward. And we've created something at Purple called Disability Conversation 31, which is about the 31 equates to December 2031, and my twins who are 2, who will be 12 in 2031, and we're looking at the issues that are important to 12-year-olds, and from that we will start to build a social curriculum around those issues. And I can tell you now, in the work that's coming back, those issues for 12-year-olds aren't about employment, aren't about housing, but are about media representation. They are about fashion. They are about a different set of things. And really, if we can focus on those areas and build the social curriculum there, by the time our 2-year-olds get to 12, then the changing conversation will be a permanent change, is what the 3 of us and everyone listening tonight absolutely wants.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's spot on. And I mean, it happens every week, this, but more so this week for me. We've got 10 minutes left and I've got so much I want to talk about. I mean, talking about change at a macro, honestly, Kira, talking about change at a macro level, if you're talking about 20% of our society having a disability, 22% of our society having a disability, surely that should be reflected through all levels of employment as well. So 20% of the seniors, 20% of seniors in this country should be seniors who have a disability. You know, I recently did a leadership report in social care, and without going into too much of it, 70% of respondents were female, but only 6% had meaningful career development conversations. 30% were male, 22% had meaningful career. So the females make up the social care sector, but not the leadership. They're not in those positions of decision making and power, should we say? So macro level wise, that needs to change. I just want to come on. Oh, sorry, Kira.
No, I was just going to say, I actually got promoted into a leader role at Mencap last year, and I'm now on Mencap's leadership team. And so I'm involved in decision making, and I'm at a very senior leader level now at Mencap. It's taken me a few years to get there, but I'm now there. And I love my position at Mencap because I can talk up for people with a learning disability within Mencap in that role. So yeah, I'm now at a leader role, so I'm senior, which I'm very proud of.
And you know, congratulations on your promotion. I just want to come to social media quickly because there's something that I'm not ashamed. Well, I am ashamed to admit it. I'm addicted to TikTok. I'm not gonna lie. I am hooked on TikTok. Someone sent me a video once upon a day, and it just sends one video, and you're flicking, and all before you know it, you've lost 2 hours. But my For You page, which is like a sort of compilation of stuff that TikTok thinks you'll like based on algorithms, usually ends up being around awareness videos. And what I love about TikTok is it's short videos. It's short videos into the insights of people's lives. And I follow a lot of families who have got autistic family members, and they've got social media accounts, and they're showing what life's actually like to be non-communicative verbally, or to have these sensory issues and things like that. How can we turn the devil, which is social media, because there is hate out there. All I need to see is another episode of Star Trek Discovery or Doctor Who, and the right wing just descend on it. Oh, you know, it's too woke, there's too much representation, blah, 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 blah. We ignore the hate. We don't let them in through our front door, Kira. But how can we turn social media into a positive? How can we use it as a benefit? Is it around these little insights into education of what our life actually is like?
Yes. And actually, last year, I got some really awful posts on social media. So I then knew somebody who knew somebody at Twitter. So I was like, I want to talk to them now. I want a meeting with them now. And I got a meeting with them, and I talked to them. And actually, it was so good because now they're actually thinking about their network for the future, and they're really trying. It's not perfect, but they are trying. And even Harvey Price, look at Harvey. He's such an innocent person, and yet people are cruel about him every day on social media. But now he's an ambassador for MenCap, and that's really brilliant, and he's helping us raise awareness. And his profile's growing now, which is brilliant. I think it's social media platforms like Facebook, like Twitter, like Instagram. Again, they need to meet people like me, understand what it's like to have a learning disability or a disability, and actually help them change their systems, help them change their attitudes, and actually then things would change. And now, because I've got contacts at Twitter who follow me on Twitter, if they see me being attacked on Twitter, they help it get it taken down straight away. So I've got inside people now, which is amazing, but not everybody has that.
Yeah.
So it's about education again, and it's about meeting people like me. And even look, Katie Price, she at the moment is still trying to make online disability hate crime a legal bill, a legal power, and she's still at it. So, there is a long way to go, but I think things will change, but it'll be slow.
Yeah. I mean, Harvey Price is an absolute idol of mine. If anything, it's because he says what most of us are thinking most of the time, which I think is just brilliant, and I'm a huge supporter of Harvey. And no matter what anyone says about Katie and her exploits outside of whatever, she is one of the world's best mothers.
Yes.
The videos and the relationship she has with Harvey is heartwarming.
Yeah.
Now, I've got one more question after this, but just on the social media aspect, Mike, what would you say to people who find... What we tend to find is able-bodied people go, oh, no, you can't do that because it's exploitative. You're exploiting your loved one. You're exploiting their disability. How do we reassure people that actually it's informative, not exploitative?
It's really difficult, and it's a tricky line to tread, Adam. And just by the way, you're really like Purple because we're joining TikTok later this year. So there you go, into the modern era. But It's interesting because in social media, I use LinkedIn, and I tried to tell the story of disability in a humorous kind of modern way that connects with people. And I realized about 18 months ago, you can only connect with people if they know you and they know the whole you. And I took the very difficult decision to show pictures of my young twins and my kids and my partner as part of telling the story, because without it would only be telling half the story. And for all the terrible things you get, I would say, generally speaking, 3-4 times more the good stuff, and the fact that actually you bring disability into people's lives in a way that they connect and can understand, and the likes of Kira and Harvey and other people. And I think what's really, really exciting is if you look on social media, there is a new wave of disability talent that is really, really shining through. That is just going to march on really quickly. And, we've got some Purple Tuesday ambassadors that we've just signed up. And, to name two, Isaac Harvey, who on LinkedIn, messages, he's had over 7 million views. I mean, just his perspective on disability is being seen by so many people. Shani Dandra as well, and we are starting to see a new kind of disability movement. And the reality is, if you are going to change people's minds, you have to use the methodology that is current, and that is social media. And I think we have to utilize it for our own purpose in terms of changing the disability conversation, and not feel bullied into staying away because, you know, the 2%, 3% of society tell you should go away and hide. And I always think, just think about the 97% and people who watch it and see it and view it and inhale it and imbibe it, who would never be brave enough to come on and say anything, but they're taking it in.
Yeah. And that's actually a really good moment. I'm going to be a little bit cheeky. I'm going to come in here and say a really good example of changing hearts and minds is my podcast.
Yes, your podcast, Kira.
Yes. So it is called Kira's Pink Sparkle Podcast. It's on Spotify. It's monthly, so every month I have a different guest. We have a bit of a chat. We talk awareness. We talk disability. We talk about their career, my career. It's like a really kind of lovely conversation themed podcast. I've had Baroness Tanya Gray Thompson. I've had Krishnan Gary Murthy from Channel 4 News. I've had TV presenters. I've had journalists. The next one is actually coming out this week on Friday, and it's actually with my very own lovely MenCap CEO, Adele Harris. So look out for it on Friday. And what I really wanted out of my podcast is for people to learn what it's like to live a life with a learning disability. And through that, some of the celebrities that I've interviewed have now said they want to know more. They want to support MenCap in the future, or they'd like to support MenCap and meet people with me. And that's amazing. So yeah, Kira's Pink Sparkle Pod. It's on Spotify and all good podcast apps. It's everywhere online. You can find it. Yeah, brilliant. And the other thing is I would love to one day be on Strictly. So watch this space.
Well, honestly, if you go on Strictly, I will. I've never watched it in my life. If you go on Strictly, I'm going to watch it. I've also popped the link to your Spotify podcast into the comments as well, so people will be able to access that. And I'm going to try and do some clips from this, and we'll push out your podcast as well. And I think I just also want to mention Ellie Goldstein. I think I get her name wrong. The Gucci model with Down syndrome. You know, we are breaking those stereotypical norms now, and we are bringing the real beauty of the world into it, which is diversity. But Twitter, Facebook, you know, Instagram, TikTok, you've got to do more to protect people. You've got to do more to you know, act on these hates. So I know we're going to run slightly over, but I just want some top tips from both of you on how you think society can just do it. One top tip: if I had to change something tomorrow to better the lives of people with disabilities, what would be your ultimate tip, Kira?
Meet me.
I'm going to second that. This has been an absolutely wonderful hour with you, Kira, and I'm going to have conversations with you in the future, I think, because I think there's some real co-production that we can be doing moving forwards. I think you're wonderful and will inspire anybody to change their mind. Brilliant. Mike, you're welcome. Mike, one ultimate top tip.
One ultimate top tip, one I learned only about 8 weeks ago, Adam. So, which is when talking to someone who's on the autistic spectrum, you ask your question and then you count to 6 in your mind to enable that individual to process the question you've asked and the richness of the answer back. And it works for people on the spectrum. It works for people with a stammer. And I would say to you, it's probably the most enlightening tip I have ever had in the last decade. And I can absolutely tell you, if you do the 6-second rule, it absolutely is brilliant and really, really impactful. So that would be my top tip.
Fantastic. And that's something I've never even thought about. Simple, easy solution. And in fact, you know, it's not a case of saying to somebody, oh, do you have autism? All right, I'm going to give 6 seconds after each thing. We could just do it to everybody that we ask a question to. Every single time you ask a question, 6 seconds.
Yeah.
And it's inclusive then. It's not. Then I spoke to someone the other day because I am doing a lot of research at the moment about how I can really make my approach more inclusive, but with the Caring Views and the IHSCM's approach more inclusive. And the one tip I got from them was don't ask people what their accessibility options are without giving them what you're already doing to be accessible. So if you already offer closed captions and you already offer other things, larger print, easy reads, tell people that's what you offer. And if there's anything else that they need on top of it, you're going to make it happen for them. Because otherwise, it's a case of we're not actually doing anything. So tell us what you need and we'll put something in place, where you want to be shown to be proactive. And actually, it's just the right thing to do, is being proactive. Put these things in place so that you're not having to run around and make people feeling like you're catering for them, because they are included and it's there ready for them, ready and waiting. I have absolutely loved tonight. I wish we had an extra hour because I could just talk forever. Any words before we disappear from either of you? But and for me, bottom of my heart, a huge thank you for joining us.
I think just, please find out about MenCap. Go on our website, www.mencap.org.uk. Please go and find out about MenCap and the world of people with a learning disability. Hook up to my podcast. I'm on all social media. Please find me, and I'd love to hear from you and have some conversations.
Thank you, Kira.
How do you follow that? Well, I'm not going to. All I'll say is that for everyone listening tonight, take away something and go and do it. And I will absolutely tell you that small changes can make a huge difference, and don't underestimate that. Think about the 6-second rule. And you've spent an hour and 10 minutes listening to the three of us tonight. Make it count. Go and do something tomorrow and have an impact. Because if we have an impact individually, then very quickly we'll have an impact at a kind of social society level. So thank you very much, Adam. It's been great.
Honestly, it's been. You're most welcome, both of you. So next week, I won't be here, unfortunately, next week. And I'm hoping Mark will be fighting fit for next week. I'm going to be on a train back from London at that time. I think it's the Social Care Top 30 launch next week. So I'm going to a dinner in London for that. But next week, we are discussing the menopause and how we can support women at work who are going through the menopause and how we can make ourselves inclusive. We do have an aging workforce in social care. It's something we are acutely aware of. And as I've said earlier tonight, the majority of the workforce are women. So we need to make sure that we are protecting and supporting people as best we can do. So it will be a very interesting discussion next week. And I'm really looking forward to it. So until then, thank you very much, everybody, for watching. And thank you for joining us. And we will see you next week.